the learning gap between minority students and white students. And now a new study shows that even middle class and upper middle class minority students don't achieve as well as their white counterparts. And that's caught the attention of the California State Superintendent of Schools. So what's at the heart of this learning gap? For a provocative conversation around our kitchen table, we brought Austin Dragon, the president of the Southern California Republican Club, together with John Rogers from UCLA's Institute for Democracy, Education, and Access. Our debate is kicked off by Joe Hicks from Community Advocates.
Guys, looks like the whole discussion around the achievement gap is intensified with the superintendent of schools, Jack O'Connell, saying that it's just not issues of poverty, but that there may be issues of culture that's informing a fairly wide learning gap between Black and Latino kids at the lower end and white and Asian kids at the upper end. In your view, you've been around the education issue for a long time. What do you think is informing that gap?
I think the primary thing that informs the achievement gap is an opportunity gap. That African American and Latino students in California receive fewer resources than white and Asian students, that they go to fundamentally different schools for the most part than white and Asian students, schools that are more overcrowded, schools that have far more underprepared teachers, and that leads to lower performance.
Austin, I got a hint you may disagree with that. What's your take?
I totally disagree, because even when you look at upper middle class blacks, Latinos, particularly in the Black community, you're still seeing those gaps. So they have the resources, they have the best teachers, they live in a safe community and all of that, yet they're still underperforming when they're compared to their white and Asian counterparts. So it's not an issue of resources, it's not a lack of opportunity, it is really a value system. Again, there is not the focus on the serious business of education. One of the studies we saw with John Ogbu from UC Berkeley, he went out to Shaker and Heights to look at these students. The parents asked, well, what's going on? We're doctors, we're lawyers, we have the best for our children, yet they're still not performing. What's going on? And it really is a value system. So.
Now Bill Cosby, in this sort of pop comedic way, made this argument that parents aren't parenting. We got to get serious about education. That's the key to the future. And the allegation coming from Bill Cosby, who's for some reason really zeroed in on this issue, is that's not going on to the extent that it should be. Do you think that there's any component of culture that is part of this issue of this gap?
I'd like to take Bill Cosby into the schools in South LA and East LA that I've been visiting recently with high school students. In those schools, I see high school students that are very engaged, that want to learn, that sometimes don't have the conditions in place for them to learn. Students I was working with did a survey of other young people. 80% said that they wanted to do well in school because they wanted to make their parents proud. Those sound to me like engaged students, students that want quality education but haven't been provided it.
So Austin, what's the problem? Why aren't these kids performing at the levels that we expect them to or want them to?
In certain communities, they will think that education is either boring or getting a good education is trying to be white. I mean, that is a big component. Education is not that important because I'm going to get a record deal or whatever else. So if you have
or
that,
fight dogs.
Yeah, or kill dogs or whatever.
Kill dogs.
So if you have that component, where people, well, I can't bring books to classroom because that's not cool, or I'm not going to do homework because that's for squares or brainiac or whatever the term that's used now.
Brainiacs.
Then you will never, no matter how much funding,
Right.
the best teachers, best principal, small schools, large schools, whatever, if that is the mindset going in, we'll never be successful.
Right.
That has to be basically addressed.
So what's wrong with what you just
said?
said?
I would argue if the problem of underachievement was a problem of culture, we wouldn't see white students in California underperforming relative to white students across the country. White students ranked 47th out of all the 50 states in their performance in 8th grade on reading. Is it because they have cultural problems, or is it because in California we have more students for every teacher, we have more students for every counselor, we have more students for every librarian than in any other state? I think we're underinvesting in our schools and causing inadequacies and inequalities as a consequence.
I would say that's the same excuse that's used all the time. And again, my number one question is, how much should we be spending?
Well, I think we have some good answers to this. There was a set of studies that were done out of Stanford last year.
Right.
$2 million was spent on these studies. And basically, they found that
you should have put that money into education.
I would think so too. But basically, they found that we're dramatically underspending relative to other states. We spend 75 cents on the dollar of what other high wealth states spend. We need to spend $12,000 or $13,000 per student if we want the outcomes that the state has said are essential.
John, they're spending that in D.C. They're spending $14,000 per student, and the schools in D.C. suck. Yet we look at parochial schools that often spend $10,000 per pupil and get far more results.
See,
so
Joe, here's where
I'm
you and I
confused.
would agree. I think that funding is necessary but not sufficient in order to make the change. We need more resources because we need to lower class sizes, but we also need exactly what was laid out before. We need to have small schools with a lot of support for the students, with well-trained teachers, with teachers that care about the students, with communities that are brought into play in deciding what's going to go on in the school. We can create success. We've seen success in schools in South LA, like View Park High School. We've seen success in San Diego at a school like the Preuss School, that despite the fact that it is 75% Latino and African American students, outperforms every school in San Diego County.
What would be your solution, Austin, if they came to you and said, we're going to make you superintendent of schools in the state of California? What would you do to try to close this, quote, racial learning gap to make, to try to make sure the kids are performing where they need to when they graduate? What would you do?
Well, there's several things. One is there has to be more discipline in a lot of the schools. One of the things you'll hear from teachers and principals, if you don't have discipline from day one, again, everything goes out the window. So discipline has to be a factor. Another thing that you'll hear teachers say is that we don't have enough of the teachers that will back us up. A generation ago, the teacher, the parent, everyone was on the same page. Now you'll have situations where, oh, my child didn't do that, or we've all heard that, we've all seen that. So basically, we need everyone on the same page: teacher, principal, the parents, everyone doing the same thing. And then the other thing is just to look at the curriculum. If we have schools that have those kind of deficiencies, whether it's reading, writing, arithmetic, all of that, then that's where there should be more of a focus. To me, the resources is how you structure the curriculum to make up for those deficiencies. That's what we need to focus on.
What would you do? Same question. You're made king of education in the state of California. What would the first few things be that you do?
Focus like a laser on two different things. One is the fact that we have a climate of scarcity that needs to be addressed. We need to create conditions through more investment in the schools so that all students have a decent teacher in front of them, decent school facilities, and the materials that they need. Second thing I would do is to direct the majority of resources towards Latino and African American students to ensure that we can enable all students to be successful. Right now, we're providing Latino and African American students with less. We need to provide them with more.
Well, I'm not sure we solved it today, but we took a whack at it. Guys, thanks for coming and talking about this today. We're just flat out of time here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.